No Time to Die, the 25th Bond movie in the franchise, picks up where the last 2015's Spectre left off, with Bond and his partner Austrian psychologist Madeleine Swann, played by Léa Seydoux, on an Italian getaway. Bond visits the grave of his departed love Vesper Lynd, who we saw in Casino Royale, and this is when a bomb explodes. Bond survives but is pursued by henchmen from the organization Spectre, which leads him to mistrust Madeleine, and he decides to move away from her. 5 years later, Bond is living a retired and a pretty good life in Jamaica. His old CIA friend, Felix Leiter, turns up in Jamaica and wants his help tracking down a kidnapped Russian scientist. The scientist in question has created a high-tech bioweapon used to target people through their DNA. Meanwhile, MI6 has moved on with a new 007 agent called Nomi, played by Lashana Lynch. Bond is now forced to play mind games with imprisoned Spectre boss Blofeld, Christoph Waltz, whom we last saw in Spectre, and he has an awkward reunion with Madeleine when he's fully back as 007. But this time around, the main baddie is not Blofeld, but a mysterious figure called Safin, played by Rami Malek, who lives on a small island and has plans to wipe out Spectre and a few billion people along with it. There are some new secrets along the way, and Bond has to battle not only the bad guy Safin, but also demons from his past. This is the plot of No Time to Die in a nutshell. And just to be clear, this review has major spoilers, so if you haven't watched the film, you might want to skip straight to my conclusion. Before we go ahead, just a reminder for everyone, if you've not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell icon for weekly Bollywood content. No Time to Die may be the fifth film in Daniel Craig's era, but it's not a standalone film. There's a continuity to Bond's story right from Casino Royale. We see a reboot of Bond in Casino Royale, and we also see that he's still finding his feet. He's cocky and prone to disobedience, which does not create too many problems for him because the previous M, played by Judi Dench, always supported him. In Quantum of Solace, he's out to avenge the murder of his lady love, Vesper Lynd, whose death had left him shattered at the end of Casino Royale. In Skyfall, Bond has become a well-established agent, but his loyalty to M is tested when she orders Moneypenny to take a hit, which accidentally takes him out instead. In Skyfall, Bond loses a second woman who he deeply loves, M, who is like a mother to him. Bond, being an orphan at an early age, subconsciously seeks familial bonds like the ones with Vesper Lynd and M. And then comes Spectre, where he is shown to find love again. This time, with the petite psychologist Madeleine Swann, who happens to be the daughter of one of the Bond villains, Mr. White, who we saw in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. Spectre also introduces a supervillain called Blofeld, who happens to be a jealous brother of sorts. Now, some people have argued that things became too messy with Spectre, but what can't be denied is that for a lone ranger like James Bond, the overarching narrative is that he can't escape from the bonds of family life. Please excuse the pun. Apart from being a continuation in Craig's story arc, No Time to Die pays ample homage to old James Bond films like Goldfinger, with the Aston Martin DB5 displaying the same gadgets that were seen in Goldfinger. There are also nods to For Your Eyes Only, which starred Roger Moore as James Bond, especially the bit where Bond visits Vesper Lynd's grave and is attacked by gang members of Spectre. Safin's lair is also a nod to the very first James Bond movie, Dr. No, where the eponymous villain had a very similar hideout. One of the unspoken rules of being a 00 agent is to never fall in love. But ever since Casino Royale, this iteration of Bond was willing to retire and have a family. Perhaps because he was an orphan, something that makes him an excellent agent, but also perhaps makes him seek a family life, at least subconsciously. The makers have taken pains to highlight Bond's background as an orphan in films like Casino Royale and Skyfall. And speaking about family, that's the only thing he can't have. That's the overarching theme of Craig's era as James Bond. In Skyfall, it's about his loyalty towards M, a mother-like figure, another family-seeking initiative by Bond. And for some reason, Craig's Bond is always attracted to smart, independent and powerful women, not the usual Bond girls who get quickly disposed of and forgotten. Think of Vesper Lynd, M and Madeleine Swann. We also see at least 4 people who are very dear to him die in his arms: Vesper Lynd, Mathis, M and Felix Leiter. These deaths are also a recurring theme in the Craig era. This Bond is not a heartless, cruel bastard, but he has feelings too, and his heart does bleed for his friends and what he considers to be his immediate family. This kind of empathetic figure is a clear departure from Bonds of previous eras. In those films, the emphasis was on Bond's exploits, be it in the form of his one-liners, his various conquests, whether it was against supervillains or beautiful women. There was always some trailblazing action, and of course, exotic locales were a must in a Bond movie. Now, this old formula worked for a long time, but by the time Pierce Brosnan became Bond, the law of diminishing returns had already struck, and Bond films had started to lose their sheen. The makers wisely chose to reboot the series with Daniel Craig and added an emotional core to Bond, and the rest, as they say, is history. Daniel Craig's era as Bond has been the most successful in terms of box office returns till now, and these are massive shoes to fill for the next Bond actor. Speaking of filling shoes, I also need to address the big elephant in the room, Bond's death, or Daniel Craig's death to be precise. This is a contentious topic and is sure to divide fans. Personally speaking, I didn't have too much of an issue with it. Given that Bond has already retired and given his love for his family, it was more or less on the cards. It might seem that this version of James Bond has lost its edge, but that's the price to be paid for character development. He's more human and therefore also susceptible to death. What do you guys think about Bond's death? Let me know in the comments below. Speaking of performances, No Time to Die is completely Daniel Craig's film, and I'm happy to say that he delivers a very fine performance. Whether he's playing hurt or betrayed by Madeline, or he has to dial up the 007 charm, or he's standing up to his former boss M, Craig is in great form. He also has a lot of one-liners or zingers like the ones that were made famous by Sean Connery, and he excels on that front as well. Of all the Bonds, I think Daniel Craig is my favorite because he's just a terrific actor, and No Time to Die is in a way a perfect send-off for him. Léa Seydoux as Madeline is also quite effective in her role, although I'm not convinced entirely with the chemistry that she shares with Daniel Craig. Bond film regulars Ralph Fiennes as M, Ben Whishaw as Q, Naomi Harris as Moneypenny are reliable as ever, and there's a small cameo by Ana de Armas, who plays a new recruit Paloma, which is perhaps one of the best cameos in the history of Bond films. Lashana Lynch as the new 007 is only present in a few scenes but leaves a mark. But when it comes to the main villain Safin, I was left perplexed by the lack of his character development. Safin's motives behind world domination aren't very clear, and while I can't fault Rami Malek for his performance, I think he had very little to work with. As a result, Safin comes across as one of the weakest villains in the Craig era, and this is a real shame. This brings me to Cary Joji Fukunaga's direction and storytelling, which is flawless for 2/3 of the film's length but loses its edge once we end up inside Safin's lair. Now there are some good action set pieces like the continuous shot of a stairwell fight, and the climax is quite poignant and emotional, but in between there's some bloat that's tough to digest. Bond's first meeting with Safin, for example, is unnecessarily wordy and opaque. There are references to old Bond films that don't gel with the film's modern setting. And this is my biggest complaint with No Time to Die. The setup is great, the payoff is fine as well, but the route to the final payoff isn't all that smooth. There are bumps in the way that made me lose a bit of interest. My concluding thoughts about No Time to Die are that it's a film that offers a fitting end to Daniel Craig's era as Bond, given that his version of Bond is more empathetic, more human, and a more developed character compared to Bond's previous iterations. It's not a perfect film and has its flaws, mainly an underdeveloped villain and some moments full of bloat towards the end. But overall, it's a solid Bond film made with a specific purpose in mind, to bid farewell to Daniel Craig. And it serves that purpose well enough, despite not being a timeless classic like Casino Royale or Skyfall. With that being said, Bond's shoes will feel that much heavier for the next actor who dons Bond's role because Daniel Craig has been simply fantastic as James Bond. I'm going to go with 3.5 stars out of 5 for No Time to Die. So that's a wrap, guys, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to my review of No Time to Die. I'm sure some of you will have your disagreements with me as well. Let me know in the comments below what are your thoughts on the movie. If you think this review was helpful, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get notified for future reviews. Finally, if you did like my video, please do smash the like button. See you guys in the next one.